You're watching Money, Money, Money. I'm Sumera Apti. My father recently retired and is now having the time of his life, primarily because he was ready to retire. So how and when can you know when you're ready to retire? Well, it's quite simple actually. The goal of retirement planning is to achieve financial independence so that the need to be gainfully employed is optional rather than a necessity. But I'm not the expert here, so let me welcome Roongta of Apnapaisa.com, who is our in-house expert on all of these issues and more. And also joining us today are Madhu and Rajesh Kumar. They've recently retired and are now looking forward to perhaps the best times of their lives as well. But before I get to your question, Harsh, I want to ask you that, conventional retirement, as we know, it is almost out of the window. Almost no one is relying on pension now. No one wants to go back to their hometown to settle down. So how and when can people know that they're ready to retire? What's the checklist?
You rightly mentioned, I think retirement can be the most enjoyable part of your life. So what are the things that you should plan well? One, I think, take a realistic assumption of your expenses. I think your expenses will change after you retire. Some of expenses will be lower than what they were. Some expenses will be higher. What most people forget are two big things. One is social expenditure. I think when you retire, your social expenditure goes up dramatically. Second, much bigger, is inflation. Now we are living, thank God, till 85, 90, okay, and at 60 you still have 25, 30 years to go. So, what would normally have been okay earlier would no longer be okay now. Second is, I think, health insurance. I think this is unfortunately that part of your life at which you're going to make a claim on health insurance. You're going to be very lucky if you live to be 85, 90 and don't make a claim on health insurance. So I think planning for that is extremely important. Third is wills. I think typical of most people, people don't want to think about death. But the issue is, if you plan for it, then you can forget about it. If you don't plan for it, it's always there on your head. And you don't enjoy retirement.
So clearly the one point to note is plan, plan and plan. You can never get enough of planning. So Mr. and Mrs. Kumar, you all have recently retired. Have you planned well enough? Do you think you're on your way to the best retirement planning that you could have thought of?
Just before retirement, I got advice and I accordingly, invested my funds. The funds that I got, from Provident Fund, the funds that I got from, gratuity, superannuation, all that. Now, at that time, I was advised to, invest funds in MIPs and in growth funds. But there has been a change in the scenario since then. That time, the stock market was comparatively lackluster. Today, there have been some changes on that score, and I would like to, get advice from Mr. Roongta whether I need to reallocate my funds or not.
Most important advice that you have got is to do proper allocation, and typically the MIPs that you spoke about before the show, they were very conservative MIPs. MIPs for the rest of our viewers are essentially funds that invest about 85% in debt instruments and about 10-15% in equity. The key is allocation.
Right.
So does this now require fresh allocation at your stage? I think you should do a reallocation of your portfolio, I think once in at least a year.
Right.
So if your equity part of your portfolio has grown, which it may not have, if your entire investment continues to be in MIP, it is self-adjusting, remember.
Okay.
If the equity portion does well, they are forced to sell equity to buy debt. And if the equity portion doesn't do well, they are forced to sort of invest fresh in equity. So it's a self-balancing nature of an MIP that has done the allocation for you. You don't have to do profit booking or anything like that. Your broad allocation in that investment remains 85% debt and 15% equity. That is the beauty of a balanced fund. It's a debt-oriented balanced fund.
Right, sir.
Do you think a do-it-yourself approach can work? Mr. Kumar seems to have done his homework quite a bit, but do you think for most people out there, they could do it themselves, or do you think they need expert advice?
For most people, there are inherent biases even that they themselves are not aware about. If they have taken advice properly, then they would have been forewarned. And when you've done proper asset allocation, and I think if an advisor has advised them and prepared them for that eventuality, then there is no panic. And to that much extent, I think expert advice clearly helps.
Well, it's true, and as they say, you'll only retire once, so you'll get only that one opportunity to perhaps, either make a mistake or make a success of it.
So one more thing, my son is still studying, and to provide some kind of security to him and provide continued finances to him, do I need to take a term policy?
And actually, I have a follow-up question to that as well, because in India, most parents, they save all of their lives to fund for their children's education. Do you think in such cases it's advisable that the children take an education loan so that that kind of funds can be allocated towards retirement and thereby, benefit from compounding?
So I think this is a question in three parts. One, if I already have the funds, then it's a matter of just keeping it somewhere from which year by year I will take it out, rather than having to invest and get that money. If I have not done that, then should I take a loan? In the sense, typically the bank would require you to be a co-borrower, maybe give your house as a security, and this is a very real question. I mean, overseas education is expensive. If they take a 50 lakh, 60 lakh loan and give the only real big asset that they have, which is their house, there have been cases, not that that the son may not come back at all. And so I don't think it may matter emotionally to them. Financially it would not matter as long as, say, the son takes care of the loan.
True.
But if he doesn't, then then they have a problem, because that's the only asset that they had. So I think the decision is not a simple decision, and I think most parents, they really have to think about it, and most parents normally decide in the positive. All that they want, I think, is that those son or daughter should take care of the loan.
No, my only simple point being that sometimes, like we saw in the downturn of 2008, people sometimes don't have jobs.
That's right.
So, you've risked your biggest asset and you have no means of paying it back, irrespective of how much you may want to pay it back. So,
absolutely.
Mom, I have a single child, so can I make a will or not?
What I think you're saying is that you have only one person who will inherit everything, even if that is so. And since you have substantial assets, 20 years later, your son would have been married, he would have had children. Now they become automatic, in some senses they would have some claim. Idea of making a will is make it and then you can forget it if nothing else changes.
Okay.
Two, please also remember that there are two of you. What is your intention in terms of what happens to the assets when one of you passes away? At what point of time your children, or in your case your son, will inherit? If you want that during your lifetimes the assets should remain within yourselves, and after the death your child should inherit, then I think it is best that both of you make wills that clearly specify this.
This is a better idea.
well, and over here we like leaving nothing to chance. So what we will do now is take a very quick break, but there are lots more questions that need answers. What do you do if you're forced into an early retirement? All of that coming out in just a bit. Stay with Money, Money, Money. Welcome back. You're watching Money, Money, Money. We have a full house today. With us is Roongta of Apnapaisa.com, and we also have Madhu and Rajesh Kumar with us, who recently retired, and by the looks of it, having a good time. But Harsh, I want to ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Kumar are lucky that they've successfully transitioned from, working to a retirement phase. But there are many people who may be forced into early retirement when they're not financially prepared for it. There could be deterioration in health. There could be a mandated VRS that they have to take. What does a person in that case do?
This can happen to anyone. Deterioration in health. Now that's an insurable risk. Now VRS, now that is something that's not really insurable. So the only insurance you can have for that is plan for a contingency period during which you may not get another job. The second thing is, please keep your skills updated so that you're never out of a job for too long.
And I have a follow-up question to that as well. So the goal should be that at this age I'll retire, or the goal should be that by the time I accumulate this kind of funds is when my retirement planning has come full circle?
So the amount is always going to be a moving target, because at 40 if I retire, I have 40 or 45 more years to live, and therefore my corpus is a much bigger amount. At 45 my corpus is a little bigger because inflation has crept in, but it is a little smaller because now I have only 35 or 40 years to go. I would plan for an age. I don't think you can plan with a number.
Now, would you advise me to keep some funds in liquid, this thing of ultra liquid funds, so that, in case of any emergency, I can withdraw those funds, very easily? And what kind of return can one expect on those investments?
When you retire, there are two kinds of emergencies. One are medical emergencies.
Yeah.
And whilst you should plan for health insurance, there will be expenses that are not going to be met from your health insurance. I mean, typically diagnostic tests that, God willing, doesn't lead to hospitalization.
Yeah.
Now that's not covered by a medical policy, and those can be pretty expensive. An MRI can cost you 15,000 rupees, and God willing it doesn't show anything. That's not reimbursable. So you need a contingency fund, and on that contingency fund, I think the key is safety and liquidity, not return.
Right.
On those funds, don't look for maximizing your return, look for safety and liquidity, and a liquid fund is ideal for that. Put it in a growth scheme, because it's contingency, you may not need to touch it for a year or maybe many years, hopefully. And if it becomes more than a year, then your post-tax return, because of indexation, because you get the benefit of indexation, even the 7.5% return that you get on a liquid fund, post-tax it remains the same, which post-tax it's not a bad return.
Yeah, in terms of, I have a couple of life insurance policies which are still running even after retirement. Now, do I need to, continue them, or can I foreclose them?
I think most of the policies people have bought long ago. Your policies must be fairly old.
Yeah, right.
So those would be traditional policies where the life insurance component would be extremely low. So effectively those are nothing but debt instruments now. And in those instruments, in those kind of life insurance policies, if you have spent 20 years in it or 15 years in it, it makes no sense to surrender. Continue with them.
But for retired people, do you think a concept like reverse mortgage could be of any help? I mean, it hasn't taken off the way it was thought that it would take off, but do you think it could be of any real value?
Simply speaking, when a person is living in his own house and is a senior citizen, he can actually get a serial loan or a lump sum loan that will help him pay for the retirement expenditure. He need not have to repay the loan. As long as he is alive and his spouse is alive, they can continue to stay in the house. The loan helps them meet retirement expenditure. At the end of the lifetime of both people, the bank can ask the heirs to repay the loan with interest, or they can sell the house to take whatever is their loan plus interest. So it's an excellent instrument if you are running short of your retirement corpus. I think one reason why it hasn't taken off, one, I think there is not too much awareness about the product. Second, I think there is this natural reluctance to mortgage a house that you are living in at this age, right? And third is this great need to pass something on to my children.
That's true, actually. And for most people, we think that, oh God, I've just spent my whole life paying for this and I cannot let it go so easily. But on that note, Mr. and Mrs. Kumar, we have to thank you. Thanks so much for dropping by, and I hope we've been able to be of some service to you, at least. Harsh, you have to stay on. There's lots more stuff coming up on the show. We need to take a quick break on that note. But did you know that schemes that carry the name mutual benefit are not really mutual funds? These companies do not come under the purview of SEBI. Mutual funds, on the other hand, are under the purview of SEBI and can mobilize funds from investors by launching schemes only after getting registered with SEBI. We'll take a